Alright, pre-fulfillment analysis part 1. Um, what does privilege mean to me? Overall, privilege means, to me at least, to have the bare necessities to support efficient and comfortable life. To bring in an example, if you have a $37,000 kitchen compared to a $5,000 kitchen, they both support the same function except one's cheaper. The cheaper option, sure, it may not be expensive and look as nice, but it still gives you enough to make your life easier. It still allows you to cook meals. It still allows you to store food in the fridge. It overall makes your life easier to live and offers a lot of convenience. Um, Overall, my definition is the basic necessities for survival that make your life easier and more efficient to live. Um, why I believe we're doing this assignment is because overall people tend to take things for granted in developed societies. We don't often look at the other side of the story or other places in the world, and we truly don't take into account what we actually have compared to others. So overall, I think this experiment is meant to act as an eye-opener / reality check to overall give us more insight into what we actually have and what we take for granted. So what I decided to ditch was basically heating and a bed. The reason why I did so is because, believe it or not, people are living out there and in poverty. So by living outside, on the deck basically, still outside, and without a bed, gives me more of, I guess, insight to what it's like to live out in the harsh conditions and not have the luxury of a house, heating, and a bed. This overall is meant to relate to people in poverty who don't have enough money to sustain heating, or for people who just flat out have nothing and are living out there. It's going to give me more of an eye-opener to, I guess, what it's like to have no heating and no bed and overall live outside like that. And overall, hopefully it goes well. To overall relate it to a theory, there's actually three. So the final three stages, blindness, pre-competence, and competence. So blindness is self-explanatory. A lot of people kind of acknowledge the problem of poverty, but it's kind of like really like, yeah, sure, it's a problem, but they don't really do much. It's kind of like they acknowledge it very minimally and don't really do anything. So it's kind of just like, oh yeah, it's there, and just kind of keep on walking on without giving it much more thought. And the other ones like competence and pre-competence are more of just like, for those who actually go out beyond and volunteer and such, they often have overall greater insight of what the problem is actually like, and more first-hand experience, and they often are able to help out the problem a lot more than the people who are just blind towards the problem. There's overall those two kinds of people who just acknowledge it and move on, and those who acknowledge it and go on and help it. Those are the two kind of people who assist in these kinds of situations revolving around poverty and such. So overall, my blogs are relatively long, and I think I'll just do a quick summary of each of them, just for the sake of time. So day one was the most challenging, obviously, because it was a change of setting, environment, and overall just trying to get a feel for the experience and just kind of trying to comprehend and cope with the unknown. So I like sleeping in the cold, but even -20 is pretty rough for me. So just overall being in that kind of atmosphere at first emotionally made me feel like, oh man, this is going to be a rough night. And I found myself fairly restless. That was a reoccurring theme of restlessness and just overall having trouble getting to sleep due to the cold. But overall, that gradually got better. The first 2 days, you could say, were very similar, just trying to get into the pattern of it, having to deal with the extreme cold. The cold was the main thing for me. It made me extremely irritable and tired, just because you can't fall asleep and it's like just constantly stabbing at you. But once I did get to sleep, it was basically I slept right through. The floor was, a tad uncomfortable, but once you fall asleep, you don't really realize that. But overall, I say that the experience emotionally made me kind of intrigued, and yet a tad, man, I don't want to do this. Mainly the cold, because the cold was extremely harsh, but my curiosity to continue with this experience and experiment rather kind of gave me enough of a drive to get through the night, and which is why I went a third night, because I wanted to have another night to go off of But overall, the reoccurring theme were, wow, the cold has really affected me and I can't get to sleep. But once I did get to sleep, I went right through. But it gave me more of a hands-on experience to what it's like to live out in the kind of conditions of the harsh winter or just living outside in general. I overall, before I could relate to due to my experience, but now I can relate even further to somebody who lives in poverty because I've actually lived in kind of like an environment that they would have to endure on a regular basis and so forth. So overall, this experiment I would say was pretty successful. I did cheat a bit, but the cheating was necessary. This was my blanket and my pillow, basically. I have my jacket, which I wear to school, my gloves, and that was basically my blanket for the sake of not getting frostbite. This is a satchel, which is a bag, and I just put it with stocked it full of gloves and stuff, so that I had a pillow because I have neck problems. And after the first night, I was like, yeah, I'm not going through that stiff neck stuff. I need something to support my head, or else I won't be able to move my neck at all. So that was my one little cheat, but it was necessary for my safety. But other than that, no other blankets. This was all I wore. And I kept the door open as well, so that more cold air would come in, and just to keep it a tad more realistic. Okay, so overall this experience went pretty well. I didn't cheat, besides my one handicap, it was the pillow for health reasons, but other than that, I went through it with basically nothing, and kind of tried to get the full experience of what it's like to live in poverty. I didn't learn much about privilege because I'm a very self-aware person. I have very, I guess, good values. I openly try to help people in society. I guess Sigmund Freud doesn't like that. But overall, I try to help people. I used to volunteer at the food banks and help people in poverty. So I have a very good, I guess, idea and knowledge when it comes to social justice problems and inequalities. So for me, doing this experiment didn't really teach me much. It just gave me more of, I guess, the empathetical capacity to understand and feel what it's like, rather than just knowing a lot about the problem. It gave me more of a hands-on approach to truly feeling rather than knowing or thinking about the problem. So this overall idea of knowing what it's like, and the physical and mental strain it can put on a person, that's overall what I say it can learn, and it's quite a brutal strain if you ask me. Being at the whim of the winds and all of that, it makes you feel powerless and kind of implants yourself as this inferior aspect in society. Let's see. So, most people in society also have this blind view of not really acknowledging problems like this. So a lot of people have a blind eye towards poverty and don't openly acknowledge its existence, or flat out don't do anything. It's forgivable if you don't do anything, but to not acknowledge it is kind of like a scummy thing to do, because most people just say, "Oh, poverty, okay," and just walk away. So I believe if social justice, I guess, activist campaign to overall kind of implant, I guess, more information into the minds of the people to just overall grow their knowledge and give them enough insight to go off of, the overall kind of reach the stages of pre-competence and competence, where they'll actually understand a problem and try or hopefully go out and do stuff to maybe make the problem non-existent. But we need to first reach that stage of abolishing this blindness and stigma towards people in poverty. It's not because they're lazy or whatnot. Sure, there are cases of drug addicts and lazy people, but the brutal reality is some people weren't given the opportunities, which is why us as a collective society should maybe come together and abolish these stigmas and such, and help our fellow human beings live a more comfortable life, because they don't necessarily have the same opportunities that we do. Yeah, so that's kind of my post-analysis of the situation, I would say.